There are currently 54 nuclear power plants in the United States with 94 reactors operating in 28 states. I bet a lot of you guys didn't know that. Like, there's a shitload of nuclear power plants. I wanted to get the current limit of how many there are. There's a lot of nuclear power plants in the U.S. In fact, I think the ones that are most interesting to me is they have designs for these small modular ones that can help like in rural towns. So the idea, it's very Fallout in kind of a way, but they have this plug that is a nuclear reactor and a plug, and they can connect these in series, which is really interesting. Yeah, mini reactors. And the idea is that you can plug these in and just have like a bunch of plugs of this. And then, yeah, they're so cool. Yeah, no, I'm glad a lot of you guys know about these. They're really neat. Yeah, they're just like little plugs in series where they have this, it's like a tiny facility thing. Yeah, small modular reactors. And the reason why that's so interesting is it's way easier to cool them down. It's way easier to have like a removal if something goes wrong. It's way less likely to go into any type of dangerous situation. It's good. It's really good, actually. And it's cool to see that. And I love seeing advancements in nuclear technology. It's just a public perception problem. And it's scalable. You want a scalable system. Yeah, I agree with that. I think the biggest sadness I had is when I lived in Southern California, we had a nuclear reactor there that looked like boobs. Everyone called it the boobs. It's right off, I think it's off the 5, but it's right there on the beach. And they had to shut it down because the seawater, they would use seawater to cool it, and the seawater was ravaging the entire pipe infrastructure through it, and it was like really bad. So they had to shut the damn thing off. I don't know if it was salt or if it was the material that they used in it. There was so many drawbacks and so many problems. Usually the issue is not the reactor itself. It's the watering system to try and do stuff with it and like make sure there's not corrosion and all that. Salinated water for cooling is a horrible plan, to be honest. Yeah, I can agree with that. The biggest problem isn't even the salinated water. It's the biomaterial that goes into it. Yeah, I think it was pipeline corrosion for that one. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was pipeline corrosion. Use the plate coolers. Saltwater cools fresh. Yeah, the biggest problem was this. Let me pull this up. Yeah, I do think this is a public perception problem. And by the way, when I said this looks like boobs, I really meant this. Like, it just does. Like this, it's not even a meme. Like this is, we made fun of them all the time. That's a nuclear power plant, right? Like that's just how it goes. Welcome to the nuclear power plant. It's not TOS. That's a nuclear facility. That is a nuclear facility. That is serious business. And here they are again. Yeah, no, they're nuclear power plants down there on the coast, but it's right on the beach. It's right on the beach, right? So that's right on the beach for that. And it's really interesting. I always thought that was such a fascinating thing. And then later in life, I worked at the DOE and I got to ask a bunch of questions from guys. And I think nuclear power just has a bad rap. I really do. And I think that there's been a lot of effort and lobbying around like coal and oil, and that's not even close to as safe as nuclear, like at all. Not even close. The idea of clean coal was just an abomination to me. It's just insane. There's no clean coal. It's not a thing. The word nuke scares people. It does. It really does. But how are you going to defend Hoth otherwise if you don't have the boob cannons? I know. They do have a ridiculous shape. Seems like an incredibly small power plant. It's actually enormous. There's a car for scale. Like if you look all the way over there, like this is the freeway and you could drive right past it. And then like that's a big rig. They're enormous, dude. Like they're really big. They're very large. Yeah. I agree to disagree with you on some points. I still not like to have a nuclear power plant in my city or close by. The thing is you might actually already have that. And I think that the fear of nuclear power goes away when you better understand how these things work and the checks and balances that are in place for them. They're all over the place. They're a lot more common than you believe. And I'm hoping that we get fusion. I'm hoping that somebody cracks fusion because that would be a very big deal for the world if we could do that. And once we do that, I hope that becomes the standard. What you run into as problems after that, though, do you want to know the worst problem with power generation? Who knows what the worst problem with power generation actually is? Because it's not the generating of the power. It's the lines. It's transference. You lose so much in transferring power. You lose so much. It's insane. Yeah, it's loss of efficiency over distance. Transport is awful, man. It's transmission. It's entirely transmission. Yeah, you lose a lot. So the biggest problem that you have isn't, lol, we built a giant fusion reactor. It's how do we make it smaller? How do we distribute them around the country? That's the issue. So the idea of a modular nuclear reactor, small ones that you can place in series, that is so much more compelling to me than one big fusion reactor, if that makes sense. Like 100%. I think that we're so much closer to distributed modular nuclear reactors than we are over fusion, one big fusion reactor that is going to die in transmission anyway. The transmission lines is the hard part. That's the biggest issue. It's a big issue for the United States because the country is so gosh dang big. Yeah, it's huge here. It's such a big problem for us. It's massive. Independent energy grids. We have independent energy grids. The problem is you fall behind in regulation and maintenance. And a lot of people will call on like Texas for what happened with that, but that wasn't their fault. That was nobody's going to change an entire, like imagine changing half of Europe's lines to handle heat of 150 degrees. You just wouldn't do that. Doesn't make any sense, right? Like that's not a thing that you would do. That was the same thing for Texas. There's no reason it should be that cold. There's no reason to build winter weathering on the majority of that grid. It makes no sense. So that was not expected. Independent energy grid in Texas, and it's awful. It can be, yeah. But helium-3 power, I'd like to look more into that. My biggest thing is I like where nuclear is going, and modular nuclear seems like the right direction right now. 150F, yeah. Eventually, the electricity grid is going to need replacement. Oh, yeah, no, it is. It super is. I think that's the thing that's the scariest is like infrastructure upgrades in the United States are probably one of the hardest things to get through. And the reason why is because our infrastructure is massive. It's enormous. NuScale does modular nuclear power. Is that the company that does this? NuScale? Yes, this is the company. This is exactly what I was talking about. This shit is awesome, dude. I love this shit. Okay, hold up. Let me show you a diagram for this. This is the coolest goddamn thing I've seen in power generation. Look at these. It's a plug. So it's a NuScale power module. They turned an entire nuclear reactor into a module that they could just go boop and they just place them anywhere they need to. It's wild. It's so cool, dude. Yeah, so heat is transferred from, let's see, primary coolant through walls of the tubes and the steam generator, heating the water secondary coolant inside them to turn it on to steam. And then convection, energy from the nuclear reactor, heats the primary reactor coolant, causing it to rise by convection and natural buoyancy through the riser, much like a chimney effect. And then gravity pulls it back down. The thing that's crazy about this is imagine instead of having a gigantic, ridiculous-ass facility, you got one of these. That's not that scary anymore, right? Like that's the reason why this is so much more interesting. You don't have this big, gigantic, sprawling, facility with all these stacks and all this shit. You just have a plug. Yeah. Let me pull up how big these are. NuScale power module size. Let's see. So they generate 77 megawatts per module. They are 76 feet tall and 15 feet wide, which is like a 7-story building. So you get one of them and you get 77 megawatts per module. Wild. Yeah. That's incredibly small. It's the plug from Avicelli. No, congratulations. Yeah, no, it's a lot of power, dude. It's a wild-ass amount of power. That's why I was like, this is the coolest thing on the planet. So it's only 15 feet across, and it's 76 feet tall. It's a giant plug. And then you're like, okay, we have enough for this town. Next town, plug, right? What is that in metric? Let me see. 76 feet to meters. 23 meters tall. Yeah, it's 23 meters tall, which is wild. It's very small compared to what you have otherwise. It's only, I guess, 15 feet, should be around 4. Yeah, okay. So 4.5 meters wide and like 23 meters tall. Yep. How tall in Steve's? 1 chicken jockey. Can I have one to power the house? I mean, the thing is this would power basically like a town. No problem. And that's the whole point with this is it's really interesting to me because I think that small modular distributable power systems like this are so much more compelling to me than setting up one fusion reactor. Because the fusion reactor, you're going to lose so much in transmission. It's so much. What's your opinion on the economic viability of this? I think this is so much more economically viable. Incredibly so. Yeah, I really think that this is very economically viable, which is why I'm really interested in what they do with this. Incredibly so, because it's less maintenance, it's less risk, it produces a massive amount of power, and it's distributable and maintainable and movable. You just plug it into a location, you're good to go. One of the biggest problems we have is distributed localized power. That is a difficult-ass thing to solve. And when you have something like this where you're like, I can put this where we need it, and we lose so much less power through transmission because it's not long-term or long-distance transmission lines, it's local power anywhere. That's a big deal, dude. That is world-changing shit. So what about durability? I don't think there was any problems with the testing that I saw with this stuff. No issues that I saw with that. And they're so much smaller and less risk in case something does go wrong. So yeah, replacing failed units could be simpler. Exactly. Yeah. Can you put it underground? I don't think so. The top of it has to be above. It plugs the bottom part into the ground and the top part is above. They have a riser thing for it. So I'm very interested in this. I've always been interested in these. I think that this is I don't know if it's the perfect solution. I don't think we have a perfect solution, but I think this is incredibly compelling and in a very good direction. Oh yeah, they can build one in 36 months. That is wildly fast. When you're talking about building an entire nuclear facility, nuclear facilities is you're talking a decade to build. Anti-nuclear people want to know your location too. They're on their way. But yeah, I think it's quite cool. I think it's really cool. Oh yeah, one of the things that they actually have on this is that they have one of the tests that they did was testing it for electromagnetic pulse attacks and aircraft impact. So it's highly resilient. Fly a plane into it. It survived. We're good, right? Because you have to test for that kind of shit, because like it's a nuclear reactor. So, oh yeah, that was the other thing, and this is the reason why I thought it was really cool. You can shut them down and self-cool them, and they will self-cool indefinitely. There's no operator action that you have to do, no AC or DC power requirement, and no additional water will need to be added. So if you want to deactivate it, you just deactivate it and you're done. And it's finished. It just does its thing on its own forever. And like that's a very compelling argument too. I think that's a cool idea. It's very, very neat. And they have all their research papers and technical publications out as well. So like you can read all this stuff. I think it's really, really cool. It's wild, dude. It's actually wild. This is very much so like future tech shit that we have now. Doesn't have enough mass to go critical. That's also the other thing too. It cannot go critical. Westinghouse, Hitachi, and the French are working on some SMRs, small modular reactors. I actually think that small modular reactors are a very, very compelling future idea for power generation. And it's just about ease of setup and distribution, because we lose so much power in transmission. It's like crazy dangerous, dude. Like how much we lose. I mean, not dangerous, wasteful. It's crazy wasteful how much we lose. It can't melt down. That's the problem. Molten salt reactor. I've seen stuff with molten salt reactors. I don't quite understand how that functions, personally. That's another reason I have more local solar power on rooftops. So local solar power on rooftops is cool for areas you can have that, right? Like the problem I have, I live in Washington State. 70% of the year it rains here. I can't have that. It doesn't do anything. Then get wind? Bro. Have you ever actually looked into setting up a wind turbine? Yeah, it's not a thing. Also, I legally can't here. Do you know why? Because we have bald eagles everywhere here. Like they're like pigeons, the goddamn things. I have bald eagles in my yard all the time, and all they do is scream at each other and shit everywhere. They're like seagulls, but with extra steps. So this is one of the coolest things that I've seen. The International Atomic Energy Agency released this back in 2019. If you look at this here, that's them actually doing this. Because what they have to do to recycle nuclear fuel rods is they have to put them in a bath, and they leave them there for like years. And then they can take that, and the fuel rods can then be like, basically they can get, I think it's like 95 to 98% recycle rate on these. And it's all done in France. France is like the biggest country that does this. It's pretty interesting shit. I need to know more about this process. Yeah, to manage the nearly 1,150 tons of spent fuel it produces every year. France, like several other countries, decided early on to close its national fuel cycle by recycling or reprocessing spent fuel. In doing so, the French nuclear industry can recover uranium and plutonium from used fuel for reuse, thereby also reducing the volume of high-level waste. It's wild, actually. It's completely amazing how much they actually reprocess this way. So, like, imagine a nuclear plant with no waste, because they just reprocess it, and you can recycle that back into more fuel rods. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, it's really awesome, actually. Some absurd-ass amount, too. Yeah. Through recycling, up to 96% of the reusable material in spent fuel can be recovered. 96%. And France is at like the forefront of this tech. And they've been doing it since this is 2019 is when this article was. So they were already up and running by then. So like when we're talking about the idea of like nuclear waste, this is a solvable problem. A solvable problem. Compared to what? Compared to zero. Yeah. It's actually incredible. Yeah, that's true. They did find black fungus in Chernobyl that feeds on gamma radiation instead of sunlight, which is interesting. That's a good thing. We like that. Eat it. Eat it. Eat Chernobyl with fungus. I think it's very interesting. Do you know about those Japanese reactors that produce hydrogen as a byproduct? What is the type of reactor that does that? That is mushrooms instead of fungus? That's the same thing. The mushroom is the fruiting body of a fungus. It's like the apple on a tree. Fusion. Oh, it's more fusion stuff. The thing that's interesting to me is how much we're pushing fusion, but I don't think fusion is going to solve the problem, because the problem is that we can't get power across great distances. Fusion is going to generate a lot of power, but it's not going to transmit it. And I think that's where you need modular nuclear reactors. That's the biggest thing, dude. Easily deployable modular nuclear reactors is such a more compelling technology to me than fusion is right now. Is fusion technically even feasible? Yes. If we get it, then it's cool. But it's not going to solve the transmission problem. Storing energy is an issue too. It is. Storing and transmission are both the biggest problems. We need better power transfer and storage methods. Bingo. It's meant to generate it. We already have transmission lines. So Midnight Torb, are you aware of how much power is actually lost through transmission? Because you're mad up there. You're putting like a bunch of bombastic shit where you're just angry. It's not supposed to solve transmission problem. WTF? Yeah, I know it's not. The problem is when you have a centralized location and you're trying to get power out of that centralized location, the farther the distance is between you and the hub that you need to be transmitting that power, the more loss you have based on this distance. This is why it's not an efficient system. If instead of doing this, you actually have a number of modular systems, which we can do with modular nuclear reactors, like NuScale is doing, you no longer have that transmission problem because you're going over smaller distances or doing it in localized areas. It's a separate problem, yeah, but it can be two birds with one stone. You don't have this problem anymore because of the fact that you don't need to have those transmission lines. That's why we're talking about nuclear reactors, modular nuclear reactors, that are incredibly easy to disperse this way, that don't have that loss whatsoever. And the longer these distances are, especially in the United States, the more loss you end up having and the more maintenance and everything else that goes into it. So if you can cut down those long distance transmission lines, you save a lot of power generation issues. With fusion, you have a centralized location, which means you have to solve the transmission problem. With modular nuclear reactors, you can make them localized power, which means you don't have to solve the long distance transmission problem. Transmission lines are not in a good state, especially around the United States. That is a really rough patch for our grid. It's something like I've talked to a bunch of people about back when I worked in the DOE. Like that was the biggest issue is like transmission lines are such a bitch for maintenance and for power loss over great distances. And like that's the thing is like I think a modular system makes more sense here. Sounds like Fallout, but okay. I mean, we already have them. We were showing them off earlier in the stream. NuScale is doing literally this, and they're not the only one. Like, there we go. NuScale power module. We were literally just talking about this earlier today. This is what it is. And they're like 75 feet tall, and they're 15 feet wide, and you can just plug it in, and it produces 77 megawatts of power. Like, shit's wild, you know? Yeah, slap that shit in a town, it's done. Actually, Frostpunk. Bingo. Yeah, it's really interesting shit, actually. So, cool. Anyway, have some shit to read. Yeah, you have to understand, when you're talking about these types of systems, it's not a one-size-fits-all. It's not a fix for everything. If you can fix both problems at once, it's probably a better solution. I do think that fusion is something we have to solve. I think that'd be really goddamn cool, but it does not fix the transmission lines. We'll have to do likely some kind of material science advancement after that. Superconductor power lines is not feasible. You got long distances. Beaming the power isn't feasible either. You have distortion and loss that way. So it's like, you know, that's why we have these distributed nuclear reactors. Just makes a lot of sense, man. Huge amount of sense. What we really need is to fix is Thor wanted to steal our pants all the time. I mean, yes. That's why I'm like, don't just get angry and start screaming shit. Like, there's reasons for this. God damn it,
Yodith Cool One with 500 bits said, "Yar cheer 500 look into TerraPower's Natrium nuclear reactor. It's way cool."
Oh, it's a sodium fast reactor. See, that's the thing that's crazy is that modular one we talked about earlier is 77 megawatts. This one's 345, so much bigger facility, but it's a sodium fast reactor coupled with TerraPower's breakthrough innovation. So sodium reactor, molten salt energy storage system, built-in gigawatt scale energy storage. That's crazy, dude. That's actually wild. Salt storage. I want to know more about this. I don't know anything about this tech. I know a lot about the modular nuclear reactors, but like this is new to me and super weird. That looks like a GDI turret, my dude. Like, it really does. It really, if it was red, it'd be nod. Yeah, so if you want to learn more about, like, lost in transmission lines, here's a smaller article for this. I wish I had a better resource to show off for this, but it talks about transmission loss, and I think the other thing that's really important, too, is cost of maintenance for long lines. The less lines you can have there, the less maintenance costs you have because of bird strike, because of tree fall, all kinds of shit that goes along with this. It'd be cool if we had superconducting materials, but that's just not feasible over long distances, man. It's just not. It's amazing to me one of the biggest issues with most of the reused resources in the world at any point in time is the inefficiency of transportation. It is. That's the thing, though. That's under optimal scenarios. So 2 to 6% in transmission and 4% in distribution. The problem is that's under optimal scenarios. You have a lot of less optimal scenarios. You also have outages. You have damage to the lines. You have maintenance costs for all that stuff. So you're now losing a lot of this value in the fact of needing to maintain that entire infrastructure. Imagine if instead of having a power plant all the way over here and you transfer all of this power to the location where you actually need to go, and instead of doing this, you cut this entire line, this whole thing doesn't need to be maintained, and you have a local modular reactor. You don't have a grid, you have a series of microgrids. That's such a better system for very large amounts of land, which is exactly what we deal with. Instead of having hundreds of miles of transmission lines, you don't deal with any of that shit. And that's such a more interesting system in terms of cost saving. It's like subnets, exactly. And that's what I'm talking about, like localized modular power is gonna win this long term. Like I can't see it any other way. The grid adds reliability. It can. The grid can add reliability, but it also adds maintenance cost and it adds distribution cost. And it's just overall modular reactors for localized power are better. Grid should be a backup, not the backbone, if that makes sense. That's how I usually feel about those types of things. Is if you had a grid as a backup and you use localized modular power as the backbone, that's way more. I think that's a better suited system. Having 1,000 individual reactors does not increase maintenance costs. It wouldn't be 1,000 individual reactors. And if you look into the tech for modular reactors, they actually are insanely efficient comparatively. You should really look into that. Like, I've posted a whole bunch of stuff for that. From what I have seen, it appears to be cheaper if you do modular reactors in series, in the way that I'm talking about, over having hundreds of miles of line. Could we just ship batteries? Batteries are tough. We don't have anything that works that way yet. If you want nuclear power to be in vogue, you want the next generation to really be into it, you could do it in under a generation. Do you know how I know that? Because many of you have bought diamonds for your loved ones because you want to marry them. That wasn't a thing before. That was the most successful ad campaign run by the De Beers Corporation in history. They did that through media. Diamonds were worthless before that. They played it in movies. They played it in cartoons. That was not a social standard until an ad campaign happened. Yeah, like that was, if you want to change public perception, you just do it. It's like, that's a thing that they could do. Like, that's a crazy thing, but that's how that works. Human beings are not above propaganda, my guys. Diamond is just an allotrope of elemental carbon. Diamonds are effectively worthless. And they made us all believe that that is a requirement if you want someone to marry you. And if you don't give it to them, ooh, it's a social pressure trick. That shit has never been like that. We're the first couple of generations where that's been a thing. That wasn't a thing before. Not entirely worthless, great cutting material, true. But isn't that wild? I think that's one of the funniest damn things. Should make energon cubes.